All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the absolute blood-soaked finale of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Act 5 is just a complete whirlwind of action, despair, and ultimately resolution. So whether you're prepping for your ICSE board exams or you really just want to understand the tragic mechanics of Shakespeare's grandest political thriller, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down every single crucial moment of this tragic climax. Before we hit the bloody battlefield at Philippi, let's just take a quick look at our agenda. We're going to cover 1. The battlefield parley, 2. Omens and final goodbyes, 3. Cassius's fatal mistake, 4. The ultimate sacrifice, and 5. The noblest Roman falls. Okay, Section 1, the battlefield parley. We're starting right at the edge of the battlefield where the rival generals finally meet. But before they actually draw their swords, they engage in this absolute storm of bitter, piercing words. Now, Octavius and Antony, they are actually thrilled that Brutus and Cassius have come down from the hills to the flat fields of Philippi. Antony basically thinks it's a fake show of bravery. But as they stand face to face, the real question is, who strikes first? Octavius actually demands to know if they should give the signal for battle, but Antony says no. They're going to answer on the enemy's charge. They want words before blows.
And honestly, this just brilliantly illustrates the insane tension between the two camps. Brutus and Cassius, they focus entirely on mockery. Cassius insults Antony, saying his words are sweet but totally harmless, kind of like a honeybee that's been robbed of its sting. But Antony, he bites back with sheer venom. He reminds them of their cowardly betrayal, how they smiled like apes, fawned like hounds, and kissed Caesar's feet, all while Casca struck him from behind like an abandoned dog. The insults here are intensely personal and deeply explosive.
Eventually, Octavius just completely loses his patience. He draws his sword and swears he will not sheath it until Caesar's exactly 33 wounds are fully avenged. He essentially throws defiance right in the conspirators' teeth. The talking is officially over, and the bloodshed is about to begin. Which brings us to Section 2, Omens and Final Goodbyes. As the parley ends with that fierce challenge, the grim reality of war really sets in. And for Cassius, the timing couldn't be heavier, because he suddenly realizes it's his birthday. Now, Cassius undergoes this massive psychological shift away from Epicureanism. And if you're not familiar, that's a philosophy that completely dismisses superstitions and omens, focusing instead on living a positive life free of fear. But he actually admits to his friend Messala that he's abandoning this strict belief. Why? Well, because the signs around him are suddenly just way too dark and terrifying to ignore. He details these horrific omens to Messala. Get this. On their march from Sardis, 2 majestic eagles accompanied them, literally feeding right from the soldiers' hands. But this morning, those noble eagles flew away, and in their place, ravens, crows, and kites. These are scavenger birds, literal birds of death. Cassius notes that they're just circling overhead, looking down at his soldiers as if they're already sickly, dying prey. It casts this massive, deadly shadow over his entire headspace. So, with this heavy doom hanging over them, Brutus and Cassius have to discuss the worst-case scenario. Now, Brutus completely rejects the idea of suicide. He basically views it as cowardly, and he fiercely refuses to be paraded in chains through the streets of Rome. This leads to an incredibly emotional, deeply honorable farewell between the two friends. They agree that if they do meet again, well, they shall smile. But if not, this final parting was noble and true. All right, Section 3. Cassius's fatal mistake. Let's move straight into the chaos of the actual battle and see how all this builds into one of the most tragic misunderstandings in literature. So the battle kicks off and communication just completely breaks down. First, Brutus attacks Octavius's weakened wing way too early. His soldiers push forward and start looting, which leaves Cassius and his men entirely surrounded by Antony's forces. Cassius's tents are literally set on fire. In a total panic, Cassius sends his best friend Titinius to see if these approaching troops are friends or foes. He also sends his servant Pindarus up a hill to report what he sees. But Pindarus makes a massive error. He sees Titinius surrounded by shouting horsemen and just assumes Titinius has been captured by the enemy. Because Cassius is already in this naturally pessimistic, dark headspace after the bird omens, he trusts this flawed report blindly. He just lets the negative thoughts completely cloud his judgment. Believing his absolute best friend is captured and the battle is totally lost, Cassius decides he just cannot live with the shame. He asks his servant Pindarus to stab him. And in a moment of brilliant dramatic irony, he uses the exact same sword that killed Julius Caesar, declaring, Caesar, thou art revenged, even with the sword that killed thee. His life literally comes full circle, ending on the very day it began, his birthday, avenging Caesar with his own weapon. Moving on to Section 4, the ultimate sacrifice. With Cassius gone, the emotional toll on the remaining conspirators becomes just unbearably heavy. It triggers a totally devastating chain reaction. The collapse of the rebellion happens so rapidly. After Cassius dies, Titinius returns, and guess what? The troops that surrounded him weren't enemies at all. They were friendly soldiers sent by Brutus with a wreath of victory. Finding Cassius dead over a simple misunderstanding, Titinius is just overcome with grief and kills himself with the very same sword. Soon after, young Cato is slain bravely rushing into battle. And the fiercely loyal Lucilius? He's captured because he intentionally distracts the enemy by pretending to be Brutus, trying to buy his commander time to escape. So Brutus is just being systematically stripped of his closest allies. When Brutus discovers the bodies of Cassius and Titinius, his grief is absolute. It's a true national tragedy. He looks at their bodies and declares that Rome is losing its greatest generation, that the nation will never, ever again breed men of their caliber. And in his despair, Brutus has a genuinely terrifying realization. O Julius Caesar, thou art mighty yet. He realizes that Caesar's ghost, which, remember, had visited him at Sardis and again at Philippi, is actually orchestrating this whole collapse. Even in death, Caesar's sheer might is successfully driving the conspirators to destroy themselves from the inside out. They aren't even dying by enemy hands. They're turning their swords on their own stomachs. And that brings us to Section 5, the noblest Roman falls. We have now reached the bitter end of this explainer, where Brutus, exhausted and surrounded, faces the total collapse of his grand vision for a free Rome. Brutus gathers his few remaining men. He knows for sure he's defeated. But interestingly, Brutus actually finds immense peace in this moment. You see, to a Roman Stoic, taking control of one's own fate and dying with honor yields far deeper personal fulfillment than being paraded as a captive. It's a satisfaction he never truly felt, not even when assassinating Caesar. After his loyal friends, Clitus, Dardanius, and Volumnius all refuse his request to help him die, his servant Strato finally agrees to hold the sword while turning his face away. Brutus runs upon it. His final words are a direct message to Caesar's ghost. He tells Caesar to finally rest in peace, openly admitting that he is killing himself with twice the willingness that he had when he murdered Caesar. The ghost is finally, truly appeased. The battle ends. Antony and Octavius find Brutus's body. And even in total victory, Mark Antony delivers this incredibly powerful, famous eulogy. He acknowledges that every single other conspirator acted out of pure envy and jealousy of Caesar's power. But Brutus? Brutus alone acted purely for the love of his country. His life was so balanced, so gentle, that nature itself could stand up and say, "This was a man." Octavius completely respects this legacy, ordering a full honorable soldier's burial for Brutus right in his own tent. But as we wrap up, it leaves us staring at a really profound final question. If Brutus was truly the noblest Roman, does true honor inherently lead to self-destruction in a corrupt world? Or was his rigid, unwavering idealism the very thing that made him noble, ultimately his fatal tragic flaw? Think about that as you review the play. Thanks for exploring this epic finale with me on this explainer. Keep analyzing and good luck with your exams.